So welcome everyone to u-nite, Unity Temple's weekly interspiritual service. I'm Reverend Nhien, and I just really hope that you feel the gift of that song and the message of that song, that you are whole and you are perfect as you are today. And maybe you feel into that even more so by the end of today's service. That is my hope and that is my prayer for each and every one of you. So this is an interspiritual service. And what that means for us is that while unity here is both historically and culturally grounded in the teachings of Jesus, teachings such as unconditional love, forgiveness, and grace, the teachings of Jesus as opposed to the teachings about Jesus, we actively still embrace practices and principles from the world's religious and spiritual traditions, understanding that each one of these wisdom traditions can have something to offer us along our spiritual journey, and that each of us has a unique path that we can, in our innate wisdom, can discern for ourselves if only we had sacred space in which to grapple with those questions. And so I welcome and invite each one of you to the space and to this moment where my hope again is that through our time spent together, through the music, through the meditation, and hopefully also through the message I have to offer, that all of it together through the community enables you to have the space to awaken more fully to your spiritual truth. I'm super excited that today we will be launching, we are launching a 6-week series called Surrendering to the Sacred in you, the sacred in life. And this is deeply inspired by the New York Times best-selling book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Now, some of you may have been here when we did a book series about 2.5 years ago. I gotta tell you that even in these 2.5 years or so since the first time, as I grapple with this book on my own and do my own work with it, that the power of coming back to some of the same teachings has been sort of exponential in the way that it can inform sort of our freedom, our joy, and our happiness. And so again, welcome to today, to this moment. May it bless and serve you. I will have Maka come sing us a song as we open into this time where, here's the book. You want to see what the pretty cover is, as we open into this wonderful series here together. Hey, so I read news recently that the Tivoli, which has been in business for almost 4 decades now, just recently in the past month had to shut its doors. And I remember when I read this, even though I haven't lived in Kansas City for that long, it was really sad. I was just thinking about that. This is a place that offered independent films and foreign films, documentaries, just something apart from the norm. And I sat there just reflecting on cinema, right? And it struck me that I had a little bit of nostalgia come up because as a little girl, we didn't have a lot of money. And so it was really a special treat to be able to go to the cinema with my family. There are 5 kids in our family, so it's expensive to take us all to the movies. And so we would be able to go for really special occasions. And I vividly remember Superman coming out and what a big deal it was to go to this epic movie. And then the next big one was the whole Star Wars series. So we were able to go when there were these special movies out in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Those are the kinds of movies that I'd get to go see with my family. Now, being kind of, I'd say stereotypically Asian, our family, I was raised in this family where being proper was very, very important. And so going to the movie theaters meant definitely we were the good kids. As we paraded into the theaters, we were quiet and proper, and we don't eat our popcorn too loudly. There's really important things that we were like. But as I grew up and I sort of was exposed to other people, I realized that not all movie goers are the same way, right? In fact, most of them aren't really. And so I've really started to reflect on the different kinds of cinema goers that there are. And so there's me, proper, the sign comes up, now turn off your, no texting and no talking, during the show. So I obey, I turn off my phone. But there are these folks, I'll just call them loud, who, it may not be that they even talk a lot, but when something comes out of their mouths, it's sort of like at random times during the movie. It doesn't seem to me to be a funny moment, but you get this guffaw, on the other side of the theater, or maybe even close to you. Usually these people sat really close to me for some reason, And so this guffaw, and I just, that proper part of me would be like, oh, okay, it's okay. And then there were the folks who were, that felt a little bit more permissible because those felt like spontaneous. These people can't control themselves, so I had some there's okayness around that. But then there were these folks who just seemed to be interested in narrating the whole movie. You'd sit there and, they'd narrate the background before the movie even starts, but they're still talking as the movie starts, especially if it's a period piece or if it's about Lincoln and they want to tell you everything they know about the background of the movie, and you're sitting here listening and you're like, the movie's on though, we could be watching, and so, but you're trying to be polite and these people but then they start anticipating, and they're not just narrating the background in the past, but they're narrating the future. So they're like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen. And I'm sitting here, well, we could just watch it happening, but they want to tell you. And so I'm kind of, I'm sitting here distraught with these kinds of people around me. And then there are other kinds of people who, they come together and they don't even talk about the movie. It's usually when two people who are like that sitting next to each other. And they start talking about something else that's going on during the week. I'm like, why are you even here? There's a movie on, but you're having this other conversation. And so as I ponder and sit here thinking about the cinema, I've come to just, have this awareness around the different voices, the different conversations, the different narratives and tapes that happen while a show is on. And what's interesting is, as you hear this, you might be like, oh, which type am I? I'm the loud one. I'm that person that she's talking about. We tend to, when we hear a story like this, maybe want to go, what's my type? Maybe you're a bit of a blend. It depends on the kind of film. What's my type? What's my type is a question that is very alive, particularly in our modern world. If you're on social media at all, if you're on Facebook at all, you see the different, what type of leader am I, right? What type of speaker am I? What type of parent am I? That there are all these categorizations that happen around in the body of humanity. What type of person am I? And that deeper question, who am I? And in our modern world, this question, who am I, is a really, really alive question. So many of us in our modern day are preoccupied with this question because we have this notion that being authentically ourselves, first of all, discerning what type of person we are, and being authentically ourselves is important. And that it's important, many of us believe and think, because somehow it's intimately related to our fulfillment. So if we are able to discern who we are and live that authentically, then we would be happy. And, I say this as a modern question, but really if you think back to Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. This charge has been an invitation by philosophers and poets and playwrights for decades, for centuries. This question, who are you? What type of person are you? And the two get conflated, and those of you who study the Enneagram with me know that there's something about that, like, which type am I, is a question. But today, as we journey into this book, The Untethered Soul, I want to take this question and go back of it just a little bit more deeply into this notion of maybe who I am isn't a type of person, not a type of moviegoer, not a type of parent, not a type of leader, not a type of speaker. Who I am maybe isn't any one of those persons or voices in a room such as this, in a theater, but perhaps it's something deeper, something behind that. And only when we can start to be aware of the voice, that surface voice that we're actually speaking, that we can even begin to be aware of that which is behind the voice. So we'll explore that a little bit here today. Who are you? Michael Singer proposes this sort of seemingly at first outrageous idea. As we, in our quest for authenticity, we listen to the voices in our head, right? And we're like, oh, how about this? We start to go like, what's really me? Which of these voices should I listen to? There is a voice right now that says, God, I'm craving pizza. Waldo's pizza, the gluten-free kind, that's my favorite. And that voice says, and then there's another voice that comes in and is like, did you go to the gym yesterday? Because if you didn't go to the gym, I don't know if pizza's a good idea for you. And then there's another voice that's like, shh, you're in a church service. Why are you thinking about pizza? Oh, did Nhien say there's going to be a potluck later today? Maybe there will be pizza at the potluck. Maybe I don't have to worry. So the interesting thing is when people say be authentic to yourself, if you're anything like me and you look inside, there are many selves talking, right? There are lots of different voices and they seem to be competing. And some of them are like that loud voice, and some of them are the shushing voice. And some of them are the know-it-all voices that are going to tell you everything about pizza and their caloric intake, and, you know? And then some are like, well, let's look at what pizza will do to you, you know? And like anticipating the future. So there are different voices in the quest to be ourselves. For many of us, it's like, which is me? Like, which of these voices is me? And Michael Singer's radical answer, not just his, but the answer that has been the answer among wisdom traditions for centuries, is none of them is you. And let me give you an example that he offers in his book just to begin to help us to really feel into that. Because even when I know that intellectually, there's a part of me just standing here going, this is me. But what if none of these voices is me? And the best example he uses, he asks a question, the first slide, is, which of these objects is you? And he says, hey, if you have a flower pot, here's a flower pot, here's a flower pot, it's a picture one. If you have a photograph, and then if you have a book, if you look at those objects, right, if you look at each of those objects, you know, if someone said, which of those objects is you? I'm like, well, that's a picture of me when I was like 4. So, you know, which of those objects is you? The answer is none of them. Most of us have that awareness when we're talking about physical objects. That's not me. Who am I? I am that which is observing the objects, right? I am that which is observing the object. And in a movie theater, most of us have a very distinct awareness of that, right? I'm not in the movie. I'm that which is watching the movie. We have that awareness. But the invitation of these deep spiritual wisdom traditions is to recognize that perhaps not only are you not that which is on the screen, which most of us are aware of, that's the object, but you're not even your thoughts or emotions about them. That these are all objects of consciousness, and that we can begin to become free. We can begin to realize our divine and true identity when we start to wake up to the fact that we thought that we were even the people in the theater, those voices, the shushing and the loud voices and all that, but we're something behind that whole scenario. So imagine that you are this awareness that is behind even that. And how do you know? He says, it's like, is there a voice in my head? And how do I know that there's a voice in my head? Well, if I'm asking this question, who's the one hearing the question? If you can hear the question being asked, that voice is not you. You are that which perceives that voice. You are that which observes, oh, I'm feeling angry, right? The anger isn't me, although when I'm angry, it can feel like it's all of me, right? But what if I were to take a step back and realize there's something that's aware of the anger, so I can't be that. And that is the beginning of spiritual awakening, awakening to the realization that who I am is the consciousness that is aware of everything else. And now I begin to understand that the type of person, the person with whom I was identified, is a false self, is an illusory self. And when I can start to recognize that, then I come from what is known as a seat of consciousness, like the seat of my soul, the Atman in certain traditions. And from that place, I'm not worried about discerning between different voices in my head. That seat of consciousness is the place from which my action, my thought, and my inspiration arises. It's the source of all that is on this screen, and the screen includes the theater, if you will, the theater of noises, noisy theater. Now, some of us, like me, type 1 on the Enneagram, like to think that because I'm well behaved, that my theater is not so noisy, that, other people's are, but inside my consciousness, I like to think that things are well disciplined. But the truth of it is, as I pondered Michael Singer's book, I'm like, oh my goodness, all those types of cinema goers are in here. All of them. There are moments where I am so loud that I cannot even know what's going on in front of me because my thoughts are so loud. And for a type 1 on the Enneagram, that's usually criticalness. Like it's bombarding me and I'm whipping myself into shape and I can't even enjoy this moment because I'm too busy chastising myself for something I've done. Loud. Oh, in me is the total know-it-all. Like I can tell you, I'll go into a room full of people and I'm not going to experience the people directly. I'm going to think in my head about them. And so that's another layer of it. I'm narrating a story. Well, this person's in the room and I know all the history of this person and this, I better be careful, like don't let them talk too much or they'll dominate the whole, just stories and stories and stories. Or maybe I'm sitting in the room and I'm worried about the future of the group and what we're going to decide, but I'm not actually there. My room is filled, my room in this consciousness is filled with all these voices. You can call it multiple voices. You can call it one voice with many, many different sounds and nuances. But the idea is that each of us, if we start to pay attention, will realize that we are not the voices in our head. And when we start to pay attention, then, only then, when we stop identifying with a particular voice, do we become free of its particular compulsive attitude, so that we can freely choose what is our divine inheritance to choose in this life. But in order to do so, we have to start paying attention to what's in here. And so when life and other people do these things, it's not about what are they doing. It's not about how is life treating me. It's not about what they're not doing, what they should be doing. But how am I reacting to it? What's the narrative I'm telling? And as soon as I become more aware, I joke a little bit about this, but really, probably, it's happening in all of us right here, incessantly, this narration, this tape of like, oh, I should have brought my brother, he could use this talk. Right? Like we're thinking about something, right? But once we start paying attention, and that will be my invitation to you this week, we start to come back into our seat of consciousness. We start to become aware of that which is aware when we realize that those tapes are not us. They used to feel like us. And if they still kind of do, we just need to keep practicing that. One of the ways in which Michael Singer supports us in doing this is to personify this inner voice. He said, just take one day. First of all, we have to determine that we don't want to live by this voice. And anyone who's done any amount of, inner reflection is already like, I surrender, right? But to not want to live with this voice, just spend a day and pay attention to what it says. How does it get you up in the morning? Does it taskmaster you up? Or is it more like, well, I don't know what I have to look forward to. Let's stay in bed. What does it do from the moment you wake up? If you were to pay profound and deep attention to that, more than you do to what is happening to you from the outside world, you might decide, as Michael Singer says, that you're living with a maniac inside your head. That this person was like, oh, so-and-so is a beautiful person, a wonderful person. And then the next moment, you get a phone call, and they're like, oh, nasty. The advice that this voice gives you fluctuates. If you pay attention, you'll realize that if you were to go to a therapist who gave you such conflicting and variable advice, you'd fire them in a second. But you don't fire this voice. Instead, you live with it and you think it's you, but pay attention. So my invitation this week is each day, or even just for one day if you can handle it, pay as much attention as possible to how that voice keeps talking and talking and telling and telling. And how you used to be driven by it. Like this was reality and this was truth. And one way, he says, is to personify, and this is where those of you who do study the Enneagram, I'll just pepper this with some Enneagram stuff, is if you pay attention and you know the Enneagram, you might notice, as Michael Singer says, there are patterns to this voice. There are patterns that repeat itself, emotional patterns and thought patterns. And he says, one way of distancing ourselves and not recognizing we're not it is to give it a character. It might be like Archie Bunker, is that your inner voice? Is that what it sounds like? Lucy from Peanuts, oh, so negative, or Charlie Brown, what's your voice? And when you personify, it can feel silly, but the whole reason behind it is then you start to feel like, wow, there's this whole character here, and I'm aware of it, so it's not me. So it's not going to control my day. wow. And when those of you who know the Enneagram know it, it's like, oh, that's the type 2. So we stop saying, like, I am this type as the truth of who I am. Instead, this certain pattern is a 6-ish pattern, is a 4-ish pattern. And you can give that 4 or that 6 or that 8 type a name. Betty, recognize it. Start to see that, oh, there's a pattern. The pattern will be different for each of us. For the type 1 on the Enneagram, it usually is this sort of critical, mostly self-critical voice of, it's not good enough. There's no such thing as good enough. When the voice runs riot, that happens. For the type 2, it's sort of like you walk into a room and, oh, yeah, I know what so-and-so needs. You don't know what you need, but the voice is kind of preoccupied with telling you about what everyone else needs or maybe should do. The type 3s on the Enneagram's like, how soon is this going to be over? Because I have lots of things to accomplish and do. This is on my list, but it's hard for me to even stay here because I have other things to check off on my list to pay attention. So each type has a different way. So in your head, there's a pattern. Pay attention and learn your pattern so you can be free of it. The type 4 on the Enneagram, that, looking for what's special and unique, different, outside the norm, and then being aware and hyper aware of how I don't belong. That could be one of the patterns. And the 5, the quest for information, checking it out. Do they know what they're talking about? I better go research 5 more books to make sure, that's what I'm thinking about. The 6 on the Enneagram might be fear-based. You might have a repetition in your head if you listen, if you pay attention. How do I guard against danger, against myself and those I love? How do I guard against insecurity? That's probably my radar, and that's what's talking. There's a movie going on. There is a beautiful sunset happening in my life, but I'm worried that, if so-and-so rides off in the sunset, do they have a saddle? Are they going to be okay? They're riding bareback. I'm not so sure if that's safe. There's a sunset happening. Life is happening. And each of us has this narration that keeps us from fully living it. For the 7 on the Enneagram, that type can be like all about the next fun experience, but once it's in the experience, it's thinking about the one after that. Sort of like, here I am riding into the sunset, but I'm thinking about, hey, tomorrow's sunset could be better, right? And the 8s on the Enneagram, if you're that type, then you are preoccupied with power and control and protecting against the innocent. So you're going to scan the room. Are there any cute puppies and babies that need to be protected? Like your radar isn't on, none of our radars is on what's happening on the screen of life, but instead on our own thoughts, absorbed in them, narrating them. And they're so loud, we don't even know what's happening in the movie of our lives. And the 9s on the Enneagram, just this sense of like seeking for comfort, for sort of a sense of harmony and peace, seeking for that and avoiding that which is not that. So like if there's a noisy screen, I'll just retreat in here. Like I'll just close my eyes. Maybe I'll take a nap, like that each of us has a way of avoiding life. And of course, so the question is, why do we even have these voices? Why do we have these voices if they seem so disruptive, etc.? The idea is that, we don't actually need them, or we don't need to heed them in the way that we believe. But what happens is, here's life, and life unfolds, and it's so beyond our control. Life for millions of years, these galaxies exploding and creating life, and life moving through, and there's birth, and there's death, and there's loss, and there's moving away, and there's graduating, and there's getting married, and there's getting divorced, and there's physical pain and suffering, and all this stuff is this life, this radiant fullness of life. And what happens? It's scary. It's out of my personal control. Why do we anticipate what's going to happen in a scary movie? To help us feel secure, to give us a sense of where we belong in the scheme of things, to give us some predictability. So we tell a story about who we are and what's happening on the screen, and we do so in a way that eclipses the screen itself. And there's a quote about the purpose up there. So ultimately, the mind makes you feel more secure. As long as that's what you want, you'll be forced to constantly use your mind to buffer yourself from life instead of living it. In the name of attempting to hold the world together, you're really just trying to hold yourself together. So the investment we have in being a type of person, living a type of way, rather than through the fluidity of just being consciousness itself. It keeps us small. It keeps us tight. It protects us. So there is some value to it. But the idea is that the spiritual path is not trying to earn our way into some future heaven. The idea that we teach in Unity is heaven is a state of consciousness available right here and right now if we're only awake to it. And it's already all here, the vastness and the beauty of each precious moment of life. But no, we carve it out. We're like, I like that sunset on the screen. Ooh, I don't like those bad guys and those bandits. And so we narrate and we protect ourselves. But if we trusted the innate goodness, wholeness, perfection of what some of us call God, what others simply just call reality with a capital R, what some call the universe, life with a capital L. Do we really trust life? If we did, we could live surrendered and wide open. We could live untethered and free, and that we could trust so deeply that we have in every moment everything that we need for that we don't have to tell a story about life in order to control it, in order to find the right way to be or do, that we can trust that we spontaneously, naturally, as an integral part of this dynamic, vast, and radiant universe, are going to show up profoundly affected by life and affecting to life, a part of the whole. If we could only do that. And so I'll close with this wonderful quote by Michael Singer. True personal growth is about transcending the part of you that is not okay and needs protection. The one inside who is aware is a doorway to the depths of your being. To be aware that you are watching the voice talk is to stand on the threshold of a fantastic inner journey. Come to know the one who watches the voice, and you will come to know one of the great mysteries of creation. I'll end with a personal short story briefly. As I've journeyed through this work, I've really come to realize how much, the mind that I thought was here to protect me from the world was really just this source of, oh wow, I'm jogging. I'm jogging along Brush Creek as I normally do. And I'm not jogging along Brush Creek with all its beauty. I'm thinking about what so-and-so said to me. I'm ruminating over it. I'm plotting and planning how I'm going to respond. And in that moment, though, because I'd been doing this work, just even recently, I had a moment where I'm like, that voice is just here to protect me. This is here to try to control what I'm experiencing. But I'm actually now, it's so loud, the movie's here, the ducks and beautiful weather and all that, I could just watch. I could just experience the gift of the light that is here in this moment. And in that moment, I'm awake. In these rare and precious moments. And so I'll conclude with a story that is told of the Buddha. Right? It's said that right after achieving enlightenment, the Buddha was walking along the path and encountered a friend. And the friend saw this glow about him. Said, "Are you a celestial being or a god?" And the Buddha said, "No." And the friend said, "Are you a man?" And the Buddha said, "No. I am awake." In any given moment, this is not just the province of mystics like Jesus and the Buddha, but in each and every moment, each one of us could be awake. Michael Singer teaches that consciousness is not a matter of degrees. It's just a matter of the focus of your consciousness. Are you focused on your mind? Are you focused on consciousness itself? And when you start to turn the focus of your awareness toward consciousness itself, I am that. I am the I am. I am awake. And I am bliss. Thank you, each one of you, for joining us here today. This is just part one of a 6-week journey. I want to close by just honoring the Spirit in you and just bringing my hands to my heart and giving thanks for the Spirit and the truth and the love and the peace that is the essence of your being. And so it is. Namaste.